Hello again, and welcome to the 14th episode of the podcast, Simple Enlightenment. I'm your host, Dean Graves. We welcome you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. As we have explained in the previous episodes, consciousness begins its evolutionary journey in the condition of primordial darkness, or, in other words, from scratch, without any preconditioning or programming other than a desire to return to its source. Inherent in the desire to return to source is the need for love, which means that as we seek love, we are exploring the full range of love from its positive feel-good and its negative doesn't-feel-good aspects. As consciousness progresses beyond the phase of evolution that humanity currently shares, the exploration of love will yield to wisdom, wisdom will yield to unity, and eventually unity will yield to stillness. Once consciousness becomes stillness, its journey will be almost completed, but it still will continue its journey by surrendering the last vestiges of consciousness's distortions. At every step along the way, the discovery and exploratory tool is awareness, and that means it's a path of discovering what already is, but from a unique vantage point. Consciousness begins evolution in primordial darkness, and everything must be discovered, but because awareness is the discovery tool, what is brought into awareness is made prominent according to the discovering consciousness's likes and or dislikes. Because of the nature of analogy, consciousness has absolute free will to choose what it likes or doesn't like, and from an infinite number of possibilities, is allowed to pursue choices based purely upon what it prefers. What is discovered is immutable, but consciousness is encouraged to create uniqueness in an identity through its independent interpretation of experiences, and from the unique vantage point of its identity, it views the immutable self, or Creator, differently. In the foundational and lower experiential densities, consciousness constructs the uniqueness of its identity, which perceives its discoveries as truth. But because its perceptions are prejudiced by its identity, they are often contrary to the immutable truth. Soon into the lower dimensions of fourth density, because of an escalated awareness, the building of a separate identity ceases and reverses the process because consciousness becomes able to recognize truth through a less prejudicial eye, transforming the identity-building process into an active endeavor of surrendering its identity so that it may experience greater immutable truth and unity with the Creator. Evolution reaches the peak of its separation perspective, and now begins to surrender identity in order to feel greater love, stability, and unity. Resistance to unity incrementally subsides and eventually ceases because consciousness becomes receptive to greater, unprejudiced, immutable truth. The unique pattern of consciousness, or ego, that third density consciousness creates is prefaced upon distortions of perception, the potentiated formation of which are intentional. An ego is shaped by how a mind-body-spirit has interpreted experiences, primarily during analog projections of itself into space-time, and consequently, consciousness is encouraged to go off the beaten path and explore itself through distortions without restriction. Because the design encourages self-exploration through distortions, it potentiates a high probability of consciousness accumulating significant emotional baggage that supports its ego identity and perpetuates its attachment to the distortions. Distortions and the resulting emotional baggage are a variance from truth, which compels an ego to be inconsistent with truth. If for no other reason, we know emotional baggage is a distortion because it doesn't feel good, demands the diversion of significant energy to carry it, and requires a depletion of the mind-body-spirit's resources to sustain it. When emotional baggage is poked by experience, a mind-body spirit is reminded of the baggage's presence and learns to avoid the poking catalyst so that it doesn't feel the stimulation of the emotional baggage. It creatively avoids becoming aware of the presence of emotional baggage by trying to make the catalyst, the experience poking the emotional baggage, go away. In order to do this successfully, a person must attempt to manage other people and/or conditions around them to meet the identity's expectations, which is the essence of stress. Stress invariably results from the need to preserve the authenticity of an identity. The physical illness and mental emotional manifestations of stress result from efforts to defend the identity from authenticity challenges. An identity is the victim's perspective, and any and all efforts to protect an identity are purely defensive. Becoming aware of ego distortions allows consciousness to heal the emotional baggage and move beyond its need to defend an identity, thereby allowing the surrender of its victim perspective in favor of truth. In a lifetime, we are provided with the opportunity to be big when the ego is allowed to be prominent, and small when the ego is significantly challenged. But the objective is to learn to be big and small at the same time. When we are able to be both big and small at the same time is when we will begin to see the immutable truth of who we really are, because the ego begins to dissolve. Consciousness says perception of separation is experienced as an identity, and the life of an identity can be graphed through the entire revolutionary process from first density through seventh density as the upper half of a sine wave. It begins as a point in primordial darkness, where the perception of separation is at its most intense. Consciousness is unformed, in complete dispersion, and an identity hasn't yet been created. As it begins to interact with itself, it begins to form a first density identity, and the graphed wave begins to rise. In second density, the wave illustrating the identity's prominence rises even higher because awareness and intelligence increase, but so does the attachment to the authenticity of the distortions. In third density, the perception of separation, attachment to the authenticity of the distortions, and immanence of its identity reaches its peak for most consciousness polarizing positively. But towards the end of the density, as consciousness awakens to truth, it begins to decline. Fourth density is the transformation period and a healing opportunity for consciousness as identity begins to rapidly decline in favor of truth, and the graph line descends towards greater unity. Fifth, sixth, and seventh density pick up where the previous density leaves off, tasked with surrendering even more identity and greater quantities of free will intoxication in favor of greater unity. The entire path of creation is the path of evolution that begins with the perception of total dispersion, creates a perceptually irrefutable ego, identity, and concludes with the complete surrender of all identity, distortions, and in total truth and unity with the Creator. The only difference between consciousness at the beginning and ending of evolution is its perception of separation, which potentiates the creation of an identity. Consciousness as creation of an identity has great value because it allows the Creator to explore itself by experiencing itself and affords learning for the Creator, both as the identity escalates and as it declines through the evolutionary journey. Consciousness is very creative when it comes to defending identity and creates its own mechanisms to avoid feeling the emotional baggage being poked. But the more creative it becomes, the more strenuously emotional baggage is poked, because the avoidance mechanisms are predicated upon force, and force creates an opposite force of equal measure. While consciousness remains within the lower dimensions of third density, still competing for intelligent energy through perpetual pyrrhic energy battles, One of the predominant behavioral characteristics is to use control dramas as the basis for interactions with other mind body spirits in order to increase its opportunity to win energy battles and temporarily feel better. It also learns to create and use anger to manipulate experiential catalysts and avoid having its emotional baggage poked. But possibly the most devastating and significant avoidance behavior is the abuse of substances, such as drugs or alcohol. All three of these conditions are learned behavior, indicative of a lower consciousness, with the primary purpose of defending identity and avoiding becoming aware of what within the self is in need of healing. Unconscious employment of the control dramas, anger, and substance abuse are all addictive because they temporarily are effective in allowing a mind-body spirit to avoid feeling the unpleasantness of the emotional baggage and transforming from unconsciousness to awareness. They are uniquely addictive and are not mutually exclusive because employing one does not preclude the simultaneous use of the other two. A person can be under the influence of a substance while angry and simultaneously employing the control dramas. The control dramas are behaviorally addictive because they are temporarily effective and common to most people within the Earth experience. Anger is emotionally addictive because it too is often temporarily effective. And a substance use is both physically and emotionally addictive for the same reasons. Consciousness within the lower dimensions of third density will go to great lengths, even death, to avoid identifying and feeling the emotional baggage. The emotional baggage can be perceived to be of tremendous size and intensity because it isn't accumulated from only the current incarnation. Remember, an incarnate mind-body spirit is an analog projection of its time-space self, and the emotional baggage is accumulated from a multitude of incarnations and stored in the time-space mind-body spirit by shaping the ego or pattern of consciousness that is the vantage point for the next thought processed. A single analog projection can and often does access the entirety of the time-space emotional baggage, in addition to the emotional baggage directly stored from its current space-time incarnation. The control dramas. The four control dramas are learned from interactions with other mind-body spirits, and the selection of which control drama to use varies according to the personality preferences of the individual consciousness. Their purpose is to effect the extraction of intelligent energy from other individuals in daily battles for energy, thereby providing the participating mind-body spirit with a temporary feeling of identity strength and/or suppression of the emotional baggage. While the individual space-time mind-body spirit will probably use one control drama method more than the other three, all four may be used alternately in order to obtain the desired result. As consciousness becomes more aware and rises through the dimensions of the density, the use of the control drama method subsides and eventually ceases. Employing the control dramas facilitates the extraction of intelligent energy from other mind-body spirits, and for those mind-body spirits polarizing positively, the theft of intelligent energy reaches a point when it is no longer desirable or necessary in order to feel better. Those mind-body spirits polarizing negatively will not only continue to use them to extract intelligent energy from others, they will hone their skills to enhance the control drama techniques to exact even greater quantities of energy. Use of the control dramas doesn't heal the emotional baggage, but it does make it possible to remain unconscious and become numb to its presence. Control dramas are behaviors and become personality traits because they serve as the foundation for a mind-body spirit's interactions with others. The control dramas, in no particular order, as represented by animal characteristics, are the tiger, the opossum, the spider, and the excited puppy. Each one of the dramas can be equally effective in extracting intelligent energy from other mind body spirits, and when alternated in the course of an experience, often create a push-pull effect to keep the target of the drama off balance and or in temporary chaos. The tiger is a control drama popular with males because it is often most effective when employed by a mind-body spirit that has created a strong or dominating identity, but females may use it as a primary technique too. The behavior is characterized by aggression, and when coupled with other identity reinforcing characteristics, such as physical strength, physical attractiveness, sensuality, intellectual superiority, or financial wealth, becomes a common technique to dominate and or subjugate others. When it doesn't work or ceases to be successful in extracting intelligent energy in a particular experience, it will be exchanged for another drama, often the opossum technique. The opossum technique is the opposite of the tiger and is characterized by a poor me or nobody loves me attitude, feigning weakness, and may create a push-pull effect that can catch the targeted mind-body spirit off guard, much like suddenly lessening the tension on a tug-of-war rope. The same confusion can result for a mind-body spirit employing the opossum technique first, and then suddenly substituting the tiger, again catching the target mind-body spirit off guard after the target allowed their defenses to become relaxed. Unless the target, mind-body spirit, is very aware, they may find themselves being dragged along in the mud of the exchange with no means of gaining traction to regain their competitive posture. A mind-body spirit employing the spider technique is very patient, plays hard to get, and allows the target mind-body spirit to attempt to employ its own favorite technique until it wanders into the spider's web. The spider technique is characterized by aloofness and is often used by people to appear above all the fray and chaos by mysteriously possessing some mystical knowledge or information. When the targeted mind-body spirit finally weakens and offers itself to the spider to garner the mysterious insight, the spider pounces and extracts the energy that was the object of its behavior all along. The fourth control drama technique is the excited puppy, and is often characterized by an invasion of the target's personal space and/or a constant barrage of questions. The invasion of personal space catches the target off guard or triggers confusion, and the constant questioning often prompts a surrender response from the target of "here's my energy, just go away." The excited puppy is the opposite of the spider technique, but it is often used in tandem, much like the tiger and the opossum techniques are used. It isn't necessary that the techniques are paired as we have presented them, but they often are because they work effectively together to create chaos in the target's disposition. It is common that a skillful energy pirate will alternate between all four techniques until a suitable confiscation of energy is obtained. In one form or the other, and in varying degrees, the control dramas are consistently used until a mind-body spirit has achieved some degree of awakening. The more proficient the practitioner, the more subtle the energy theft overtures may appear, and the more successful the enterprise. When a mind-body spirit successfully uses these techniques, they are benefiting from an immediate feel-good gratification of intelligent energy in lieu of their need for love. But substituting the immediate gratification avoids the required introspection and awakening. Because consciousness temporarily feels better, it seldom is motivated to seek beyond the immediate gratification of the need to feel better, much like being satiated after a meal and not realizing that the cupboard is bare with nothing to eat for the next meal. The control dramas require the application of some degree of force to be successful, and as long as it is successful, it is probable that the mind-body spirit is going to repeat the behavior until the control dramas fail. Proliferation of control drama behavior adds to the predisposition towards a chaotic environment for all consciousness participating in the immediate environment. The behavior is common among lower dimension third density consciousness, continues for all consciousness polarizing negatively in fourth and fifth density, but ceases for consciousness polarizing positively near the end of its third density tenure. The design of a lifetime for those choosing to polarize positively is that they will unconsciously battle for energy until they are unable to continue because they are failures in their energy battling ways and become sufficiently aware because of the pain and or suffering that results from failure to be able to decide that they cannot continue doing the same thing. They hit rock bottom because of their energy bankruptcy and are forced to change by ceasing to try to control the world around them to meet their expectations. It isn't required that mind, body, spirits enter an energy bankruptcy condition, but humans have proven very resistant to change without an extreme experience as the motivation. The alternative to the control drama energy pirating behavior requires consciousness to look inside the self, heal the emotional baggage, surrender its identity, and discover they are the source of what they seek. The design of a negatively polarizing mind, body, spirit's lifetime is such that they will continue to find success in their energy pirating enterprises, so they are not motivated to become aware. The consistent success in energy confiscation reinforces identity, and they practice to enhance the techniques, enhancing immediate gratification of intelligent energy, but never knowing love. Exploring the self and surrendering identity versus reinforcing identity is the service to others or service to self choice of third density. The control dramas are simply a technique or created behavior to avoid becoming aware and doing the required work of sobering from free will intoxication. Anger. Anger is another technique to avoid becoming aware of the emotional baggage accumulated within a mind, body, spirit, and doing the work to heal the baggage so a sobering from free will intoxication can occur. Anger is an emotion, but it's a secondary emotion, a defensive emotion, created by the rational logical mind, unlike the primary emotions such as fear or heartache that arise from distortions within the chakra system. The primary emotions facilitate distortions to a mind-body-spirit's pattern of consciousness and result in emotional baggage. The primary emotions offer potential lessons to allow a mind-body-spirit to explore the self and, consequently, allow the Creator, as personified in a mind-body-spirit, to explore itself by experiencing itself. Anger doesn't explore anything, but allows a mind-body-spirit to temporarily avoid feeling the emotional baggage stored within, and much like the control dramas, allows a person to avoid becoming aware and surrendering its free will intoxication. Experiences, also known as thoughts, allow a mind-body-spirit to interact with other mind-body-spirits as either the subject or object in order to experience itself, learn about itself, and become more aware of who they really are. Experiences are messages to the experienced participants about themselves that are designed to aid them in becoming aware of ego identity's distortions and through awareness, surrender them, thereby becoming more attuned and in alignment with the Creator. Anger is a secondary defensive emotion used to make the experience that is triggering the emotional baggage go away, so they don't have to feel the emotional baggage. Whenever a person gets angry, they are missing the opportunity to look inside and identify the underlying emotional baggage being triggered by the experience. In the emotional baggage is the lesson about the self that will allow the individual to heal the distortion, surrender more of its free will intoxication, and advance its dimensionality. Anger suppresses awareness and reinforces unconsciousness. Therefore, it keeps us from evolving. When consciousness becomes aware of what anger is and is doing, it can be used as a pointer to aid the development of awareness. Because it is easily recognized, if a person learns to recognize when anger is arising, stop, and look underneath the anger, it is fairly easy to identify the underlying primary emotion that is the real culprit that needs attention. Once the underlying emotion is identified, a person can use awareness to discover the depth of the primary emotion and allow it to dissipate. This is the healing process described in the earlier episode discussing meditation and mindfulness. Substance abuse. The last method we will discuss, used by mind-body spirits to avoid doing the required work of healing identity distortions and evolving, is lumped into the category of substance abuse, which generally includes any and all drugs, alcohol, and/or smoking. Substance abuse is more complicated than the previous methods because it adds the element of a physical distortion and/or addiction. A physical addiction makes the behavior more complicated because it distorts mental faculties necessary to become aware, but it is employed for the same purpose as the control dramas and anger. Why does anyone smoke, drink alcohol, use drugs, overeat, oversex, gamble compulsively, etc.? Without exception, the honest answer is to attempt to feel better. So what doesn't feel good? Without exception, the honest answer is the emotional baggage. The body is a product of the mind, and the mind instructs the body how to be with every thought. Once the mind has instructed the body to include a need for a substance, the body will thereafter include, in its per-thought report to the mind, the condition of the need for the substance, until such time as the mind provides a corrective instruction to the body that it no longer needs the substance. Just like when a computer is programmed to perform a certain task until it is instructed otherwise, the body will continue to tell the mind, with the processing of every thought, that it needs the substance. This is true for other illnesses too. Once the mind has instructed the body to include the condition of an illness, the body will manifest the illness and continue to report the manifestation to the mind with every thought. Cancer is a prime example of this behavior. The body may be genetically predisposed towards developing cancer, but the predisposition may never be enacted because the mind never needs to use the experience of cancer to guide the mind-body's spirit's evolutionary development. The potential for illness is often incorporated into a timeline as a catalyst for awakening of the mind-body spirit during its incarnation, or to keep it on the evolutionary path chosen prior to incarnation. If needed, it can be activated at the discretion of the mind or spirit to serve as a catalyst for the mind-body spirit to redirect its timeline trajectory and realign with its pre-incarnate goals and/or mission. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, the 32nd President of the United States, was an excellent example of this. FDR had a mission to alter the course of service to self-domination built into his timeline, but the fulfillment of the mission required a very delicate balance because of the environment and temptations of politics that could distract him from the pre-incarnate mission. As a safeguard, polio was potentiated in the timeline to be used as a catalyst to limit his ability to go off-script from the pre-incarnate mission. As anticipated, he began to succumb to the temptations, and his unmanifest self triggered the catalyst which successfully brought his incarnate self back to the original mission, but had he not been so distracted, the illness wouldn't have been necessary. Substance abuse hinders the brain's ability to be a clear channel, a filter, for thought, and it's necessary to clean the substance from the body before any substantive awareness can develop. Lots of people experiencing substance abuse get clean over and over again, but repeatedly relapse because seldom is there any support system to aid them with their awareness development and healing of emotional baggage once clean. Emotional baggage is the underlying motivator for substance usage, and until a mind-body-spirit undertakes the task of healing the underlying baggage and develop awareness, the propensity to use the substance will remain. All healing, physical, emotional, or mental, is achieved with awareness. Awareness is both the discovery tool and the healing tool, but it isn't awareness of the world outside of the self that heals. We all are tasked with exploring the self, and healing the self is only an elementary phase of self-exploration. This concludes episode 14 of the podcast Simple Enlightenment, and we thank you for listening. Please visit our website at podcastenlightenment.org for a transcript of this episode and to listen to other episodes and/or download other transcripts. If you are finding these recordings helpful, please share them with family and friends that you believe may find them beneficial. While visiting the website, please take a moment to make a donation because Simple Enlightenment is entirely listener-funded, and we rely upon the generosity of listeners like you to continue to offer this information. Our objective is to change the world by offering truth, and you can be a part of that effort by applying what you learn to yourself and beginning an earnest endeavor to explore and heal the self. Also, while at podcastenlightenment.org, please like and share us on your favorite social media platform. For now, we leave you in the love and the light of the One Infinite Creator. Theme music by Dr. Ken Wendt.